Begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Samach. Begin on the second line down at the top of the Yamid. The Gemara continues explaining the halacha of our previous Mishnah, which we opened up the next mazik. We spoke about already shiur, bor, and mava, the machlekes, but we spoke about the mazik of shein, and now the Mishnah moves on to the mazik of hever, of eish, which we're in the middle of the Gemara explaining the halacha. But if you send your fire through someone else, depends if the person's a chershet v'katan or if the person's a pekech. And the Gemara discusses actually the qualifications of the mazik of eish regarding when there's a few parties involved. What is the liability of the mazik of eish for, and who would be the one responsible for that? She's co-responsible. Turn to Daf Yomi, turn to today's Daf. Throughout the entire world. So we're discussing today's daf are the mazik of eish. It says in the Torah, which we're going to discuss later on, the necessity of all the words of the pasuk, where it says kiseitze eish. If a fire is going to go out, umatza kaitim is going to find thorns. V'nechel gadish, and the pile of grain is going to be eaten up by a kamo, the standing grain, or a sadu of the field. Shalom yishalom hamaves be'era. The one who made the fire shall surely pay. I think Gemara we brought already on the previous amid. Machlekes Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, what is the liability of Ishai? Is it mishum chitza? Is it because of your arrows? Considered niske gufa because it's kaichai? It's the person's the direct action? Or Rish Lakish has isha mishum mamayne? It's because of your money, like all the other mazikin, and it's his property causing damage. What's the liability of Eish? And the Mishnah differentiates between shalach biyad cherashayt v'katan. If you send it through a deaf, mute, mental range, or minor, that then you're going to be potem in the adam, but you mechabed in the shemaim. But the machlekes Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg is relevant regarding what is the case, as we brought already at the end of the previous stuff, of what's the case of cherashayt v'katan. What did you actually give him? Now the Gemara will start now regarding liba. If someone blows on the fire, what would qualify for his liability, in contrast to the other environmental factors of this eish causing damage or not? Taman, which is halacha of a machlekes regarding if the object is hidden, is there going to be a liability for the mazik of eish or not? So begin the current daf samach, the second line down at the top of the amid. We started the previous Mishnah, niske eish, damages through fire. We said if someone sends a fire biyad cherashayt v'katan, who then burns another person's possessions, we said potem b'din the adam. Bezin cannot compel him to pay for the damages because it wasn't him. But Chai B'din Nishmayim has a moral obligation to make reparations because ultimately it's his negligence by giving it to Chereshayt V'Katan. Whereas if he's put to Biyad Pekech, that person takes over the responsibility. So the Gemara elaborated on the Mishnah based on the Machlekes Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. If you hold Isha Mechitza Mishum Mayne, everyone agrees if Masle Gecheles V'Liba, you give him a coal and the Chereshayt V'Katan flames it up. So the original person is going to be patabed in the adam mechabed in the shemaim because it's ma'aseh the cheresh garmoy. Either like you hold it with its arrows, is koich the cheresh, it's the force of the deaf mute, or if you hold it because b'mayne, it's b'mayne hamazik the cheresh because the cheresh made it into a mazik. It wasn't a mazik, it wasn't your mom and a mazik before the cheresh went and blew at it. And all agree also the other way. If masle gabzus, so this is the last line that we had on the top of the Amid Aleph, if he gave him the actual thin woods and fire and all the ingredients, so it's inevitable that a fire is going to spread because vadam is the garmer. So it's the koich of the mishalech, or it's mamana mazik the mishalech because already there was a mazik when the owner gave it to the cheresh. Machlekes Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg is about masalei shalhaves. If he gave the cheresh a flame such as a torch, that we have a machlekes Rabbi Shloimy that says he'll be pot within the adam and chai b'din shemam like the Mishnah said, because he says it's savsa the cheresh garmalei. It was the holding of the deaf mute that actually ends up causing it. But you b'din shemaim because you're a garim. Shlomo shows no, you b'din the other ma'asav kol garmalei. Ultimately, that it's still your mom and hamazik, and therefore that's Rish Lakish should hold in such a case. The owner, the one the mishaleach would be chayv and not the cheresh shayt v'katan. Now the Mishnah then went on, and that's what our Mishnah is really going on. The Gemara quotes the words Shalach biyad bekeach. He sends in the hand of bekeach chayav b'chulu. So first the Gemara discusses just the actual semantics, the actual word itself. Amar Nachman Yitzchak, he says, Mandatani liba le mishtabish, or Mandatani niba le mishtabish. There's two different gesayis, either with a lamed or a nun, which we said that we went on to say that if you give it over to Pekeach, a regular person, okay, he's going to be chayiv. Then the Mishnah described and said, okay, what happens if echad hebisa or echad hebisa eitzim, or echad hebisa eitzim, or one guy brought the flame and then the wood, or one guy brought the wood, then the flame? We said, okay, it's going to be the last one that's going to be chayiv, because if not for the last one, whether it be the flame or the wood, nothing would have happened. Now, what happens if a third person comes along, and there's a guy with the wood and the guy with the flame, and then ba'ach b'liba, and then the guy goes, he's fanning the flames. Oh, okay, so Hamalah b'chayiv, because ultimately he did it. And then the Mishnah finished by saying, Libsa haruach kul b'turin. If the wind fanned the flame, they're all exempt because it was ultimately the wind that made it into a mazik, as Taisa discusses at length, and therefore they're all going to be pater. So on the words of liba or niba, the Gemara just says that both of those gesaris would be correct, as the Gemara explains. Mandatani liba, the one who says that you fanned it with a lamed, lemishtabish, not making a mistake, because the simply we have a pasuk in Shemais says balabas eish, the flame of fire. So you see that flaming liba would be an appropriate girsa. Mandatani niba lemishtabish, one has with a nun, is not mistaken. The Chassidus says a pasuk in Yeshaya, boirei nivs basayim, he creates the speech of the lips, which the niba is when a person's speaking, his lips move, and there's wind that comes out by the movement of his lips. That's also a way of fanning it by blowing on it. So either way, there would be an appropriate girsa for saying about this third guy that he would be liable. Okay, but then as we just mentioned, Mishnah says that lips haruach, but if the wind fans it, then kulam b'turin, they're all going to be exempt. So the Gemara elaborates on this last halacha. Gemara brings a braysa, tanabam the braysa. Liba v'libsa haruach. What happens if it wasn't just the wind? It was the person and the wind fanned the flame. So one guy brought the wood, he's not going to be chayiv, he's not the last guy. One guy brought the flame, he didn't do it. One guy's blowing, he's fanning it, and the wind is also blowing it. What? Indistinguishable?
Someone blowing compared to the wind. Indistinguishable. What he contributed to that.
So there's always forensics. There's always assessments that they have tools to measure what would have been with just one of the forces that are here, and that's what the Gemara at least is assuming, that we would have the ability to measure the metrics and the force and to see what was caused by what. So the for maybe a layman not, but if people have sophisticated tools, they might be able to figure that out. So that is what the Bryce is discussing. If he's fanning and the wind's fanning, it's a sister Bryce like this. If his fanning would have been enough to fan the flames, which would then go and consume the next door's bungalow, okay, he's liable because it was his cause. V'mlav pater. But if not, meaning if the flames only spread due to the fanning of the wind as well, then he's going to be pater. Okay. Taisa explains that it must be talking about, this is the top Taisus, that it's not enough with the wind on its own to have flamed it also. Because if the wind itself would have been enough to flame it, then even if the guy himself was fanning it would have enough to flame it, why would it be chayiv? Without him, the fire anyways would have gone to damage. Rather, it says obviously that the wind itself would not have had enough to flame it, and therefore, when his flaming has enough to flame it, the one who's flaming it would be chayiv because he did everything. Because Taisa explained this is what we had in Masech the Shabbos, ze yochel v'ze einu yochel. When one guy could have done it and the other guy couldn't, the one who can't is like what's called Mesayeh Yeshem B'mamish. His helping has no significance. But if the guy's flaming does not have enough to do it, even though that together with the wind, which also does not have enough to do it, they do it together, it's going to be pater. Because you're not liable for Isha, for your fire, only if you made it so much independently that without the wind or something else, it could damage with the Ruach Mitzvah. This is a question that bothers everyone when they read this. What do you mean? Isn't this Aish? That you have to configure that the wind, we're going to do it. No, it has to be a full mazik that, okay, then when it comes a wind, after he finished making the mazik, it could damage. I think it does. You have to know. Yeah, it's not clear exactly what it means. Right. No, so we're going to see in a second regarding what did they actually do together, but just theoretical. Taisa is saying that you have to make the mazik. Now that the mazik is here, a regular wind could go and take it. We're not talking about that you actually light in someone else's you take a blowtorch and you go to someone's property and you start arson. Is you make a fire. That's what the words hamav esabev sounds like. That independently he made the fire, which now could be mazik with mitzuya. Therefore, over here is going to be potter. Why? Because without his fanning it, it couldn't have damaged. The fanning is the gemar asiya, and now the malaba didn't do it on his own. That's what the Gemara asks now. Why? Says the Gemara, Amai, why is this? What? What's the question? Lahava kazoida v'ruach mesayatoi. This should be like the malacha of winnowing, which the wind helps you. We know one of the lamates malachas in Shabbos is a malacha of zaira. What's zaira? Zaira is after you did threshing, so you have now it got detached the husk from the kernel. You take some type of a instrument and you throw it up, and then when it goes up, the heavier kernel falls down, winnowing, and the lighter chaff, the wind will blow it away. And we see that you're chayiv for Zoyra on Hilchas Shabbos. So you see, even though the wind is helping you do it, you couldn't have done it with just your own action. We see that there is a liability, which that's what Tais explains the Gemara's question, that we see that it's like as if you did on your own. How could you be chayiv malacha on Shabbos? You're not chayiv when shnaim sha'asu. You're not chayiv when you didn't do it yourself. We see like
that's the derech.
Oh, okay. So, but if that's so what do you mean that's the derech?
You rely on it to do that malacha.
Right. So why can't that be also over here when you're making the fire? You're also relying on the wind.
This is something you don't want and you're not relying on it.
Okay, so we'll see if that falls into one of the categories of what the Gemara is saying. So answer number one, Rama Abaya. He says that what are we talking about over here? He's fanning it from one side, the libsa haruach mitzad acher, and the wind is fanning it from the other side, which obviously that he's not helping at all because they're blowing from different sides. That's how Rashi says it. The Taisa says that it wouldn't be the norm for the wind to help if they're fanning from different sides. So Taisa says, so even if it happens that then the wind will help him, which that should be like winnowing, you should be chayiv. No, you can be potter because Taisa says you should not have entertained to think that the wind's what the wind is blowing is going to help your fanning, because it's not common that they should combine, that the winds from different directions will combine, and he should not have been that careful regarding that, more than the ruch she'ein mitzuya, which you're also not going to be liable for. That's one pshat Taisa says. Another pshat he says, what does it mean liba mitzad echad? Is that the way we understand from Rashi is that it's different directions. He's blowing one way and the wind is blowing another way. Taisa says another pshat is that mitzad echad means to say that his fanning would not be enough to fan the whole flame, and neither the wind. It's just that on one side of the flame he's fanning, and another side the wind is fanning. Now, if the flame was only being fanned from one side, it would go out and it would be extinguished because it would be too little. But because of the flames are connecting, so the fire gets bigger and it damages, and therefore says Taisus, now that's not similar to Zaira, where the wind helps, because what you're fanning, the wind is not helping at all. It's like, it sounds like from Taisus that the two sides, mitzad echad or mitzad acher, doesn't mean opposite sides. It sounds like the same side, but different sides of that side, and together they're doing it. But it's not that you're doing independent sides. So it's not like Zohar where the actual thing you're doing, the wind is assisting you in what you're doing. So those are two different approaches in Taisus regarding answer number one, that he's fanning it from one side and the wind is fanning it from another side. That's not something I should have entertained to say, and therefore you're going to be liable. And it's not like Zohar. Answer number two, each one of these answers are unique. Answer number two, Rava Amar, he says, Kagun Shaliba Beruach Mitsuya. They were talking about where, when he started to fan it, so the wind wasn't blowing so strong. And a common wind would not have inflamed it. And then it came along an uncommon wind, which was not in the forecast. And then the wind came and blew it with a totally uncommon wind. You're make a barbecue, and not regular wind, isn't that? You're making a thing, you're not expecting to do anything. And suddenly, whoosh, a huge gust of wind comes. That's something that he would not have had to entertain. But Zaira regarding Shabbos winnowing, well, that's enough with this sounds like Shabbos a little bit what you were saying. It's enough with a common wind, and that's what you had in mind. You do the winnowing, you take that shovel and you throw it up, and the wind blows it off. So there you're going to be chai for malacha on Shabbos, because that's your intention and that's common. Here, it wouldn't have done anything with a common wind, therefore you're going to be pater. Which, like as Taisa explains, that if his fanning has enough to fan with a common wind, you're going to be chayiv, because that's considered as if he did the whole thing himself, according to this second answer in the Gemara. And if not, if in his fanning, together with a common wind, would not have enough to blow, it's only through an uncommon wind which helps him, so then he's going to be pater, because the Ruach Shrein Mitzui doesn't have to entertain. That's answer number two. Answer number three, Rav Zeira Amar. He says, going to tzamra tzimuri, which Rashi says that's a terminology of like a fever, like a warmth. In other words, what does that mean, a warmth? That he didn't really blow on it, he didn't really fan it, he just breathed. That like someone that he warms up his hand by just breathing on his hands, which that's not really fanning at all. Which, as Taisa explains, he's not really fanning with the wind, like the blowing of the wind. It's literally just the heat of the vapor of his mouth, which he's blowing, which he's breathing on the flame. So what is it talking about? So Taisa explains. He says, if his breathing on itself could have flamed it, he's going to be chayiv. If not, you're going to be pater. The wind is helping and flaming it up, so that should be like winnowing, which the wind helps and you're liable for. No, he doesn't have to entertain to think that the blowing of his breath is going to help and together with the flame, with the wind to flame it up, because it's not shriach that the breath, that the blowing of the wind with your breath will help with the blowing of the wind should help with just your breath. Why? So the way you read from Rashi just sounds like, okay, well, you're just breathing. That's not the same thing, and therefore you would have thought you're pater. Taisa says interesting. He says they actually ruin each other, because even if you're blowing from the same side, but your breath is hot and the wind is cool, so Taisa makes it sound like as if those are contradictory, and therefore you don't have to entertain to think that they're going to work together. If it does, so that's what I'm saying. We're saying that you're going to be pater. In contrast to winnowing, which obviously that they work in tandem, as we know, it's one of the lamatas malach. It's one of the productive acts and constructive acts of making bread. So that's answer number three. That he merely breathed as one does to one hand. So it's not his actions are not even assist in the blaze. That's at least the way Rashi says. Answer number four, and this is more the classic answer that's given. Rav Ashi Amar, he says, when do we say the halacha of winnowing, that the wind is assisting, and yes, you're going to be liable for that? That's regarding malacha of Shabbos. Why? What did the Torah say is forbidden? A calculated action, and your thoughts are fulfilled, where you want it with the wind assisting. And that's really also what you're saying, Shabbos, because that's the normal way of how it's supposed to be done. But over here, regarding the laws of damages, grama balmu, it's an indirect cause. Grama b'nizakin pater, and causation by damages, you're going to be exempt. As Taisik explains, he says that when you cause the winnowing through the wind that helps, that's a malachas machshavas. That's a calculated action. That's what you wanted to do, the productive act, which is done through wind. So therefore, you're going to be chayiv for causing the winnowing. But when you do an action of winnowing by itself, that means that's not going to be called that. So therefore, over here it's not called as a mavir, as habe'era. You're just a karama, and the Torah says hamavir, not a gairim of causing the wind. And so therefore, if it's through the wind, so therefore it's going to be considered as a grama regarding Eish, like all of the gramas, which we know the halach is grama ben nizakin is going to be pater, and therefore that's why. And Tais says even a bigger chiddush in the next Tais is he said if two people bring the wood and the fire and they both blow and each one of them don't have enough to flame it, you're going to be pater, because you see this halacha of the wind helping means that you didn't do the whole thing. The Gemara is calling that a Gemara. Tais says it's the same. Tais says it's a wonder. But Tais says that would seem like that what comes out from our Gemara is that if you're not doing the whole thing yourself, the wind's helping, so you're grama. So that means each person, if two people do it together, each one's only a grama. Okay, you have to know. That's what Tais says would sound like from the Gemara. Those are four different answers to explain why over here, when it's the libsa haruach, which the Brisa said, if the guy's breathing itself, his fanning would not be enough. It's only together. And Tais says it's also not enough for the fire, for the wind. It's only the wind and his breathing together that makes the fire become a mazik, and then it goes and burns someone else's thing. For pshatim, why is it different than the malach of Zayra on Shabbos? That, as we said, that either because it's from different sides over here, and therefore you're going to be pater, or because it's only through an uncommon wind over here, or because he really was just breathing, and different pshat and Rashi and Tais is why that would be like not really to entertain to think that the wind's going to help you, and or like we said, the more classic answer is that no, Zaira is a malachas machshavas, that it's done through the wind. But by mazik, we don't care what your intention is. And did you do the damage? No, you were grama. You only caused it because it wouldn't have happened without the wind. Again, not like we say your classic Eish that the wind takes it, ruch mitzuya. We're saying the idea of making it into a mazik, it would never become a mazik without the winds blowing to flame it into a flame, and therefore you're going to be pot. We tell Allah the next Mishnah, get on this mazik of Eish. Hashalech hasabe'era. If someone sends forth his fire, and it consumes wood or stone or earth, which, what does that mean? Rashi explains it scorches the plowed field and it gets ruined because you can't really consume earth, but it scorches it. So you're going to be liable, like it says the pasuk in Shemais. The Torah tells us when the fire is going to go out, the matzah kaitzim is going to find thorns. V'nechel gadish, and the pile of grain is going to be consumed, or the standing grain, or the field. That's really the chiddush. We're saying even the field itself, the earth. Shalom misham amav zebeira. The one who makes the fire is going to surely pay for the damages. Now, Amar Rabba, he explains, Lamali the Kaz Rachmana, why did the Torah have to write all these terminologies of kaitzim, of thorns, and gadish, and the pile of grain, and kama, and the standing grain, the sada, and the field? Was stuff mezagan, as I feel variables, why don't you just pick and say if it caused damage to his field? It says, Rabba says, you need all these to tell us. Because Rachmana kaitzim, we only said thorns, I would have thought to say kaitzim, who the chayiv. Rahman, the Torah says you're liable by thorns. Why? It's common to have fire by thorns, like Rashi explains. People are not careful with thorns, and actually they're meant to be burnt. And therefore you could say, B'shchich the Pasha would be common for a person to be negligent, and therefore you'd be chayiv. But a pile of grain, where it's not common to have fire by that. And therefore it's not common that a person would be negligent. And therefore you could say if it does happen, we would consider him as a oinus, and he actually would be potter. Aim aloi, I would say not. So therefore you have to say also the case of Gadish. Yeah, but I'm saying, Rabbi, how does it go? How's it going? How's it traveling? So it's your field. I don't know. No, that's what I'm saying. It has to, but I'm saying it has to catch on to something. To then blaze into this big blaze. So so thorns are something that people are not careful to have fire near them. It's not something that they. No, it could be any. I'm saying that this is not even so much. I don't think it's a word of saying to be liable on his thorns. It's how the fire took off.
My thoughts?
Could be.
What they say?
Could be. It's just about what is how's it spreading? How's it? Yeah, you're saying you want to know if it's only his. Yeah, you're saying. I mean, the same thing could be also thorns. Yeah, why his property? Yeah. So because like when the Gadish had it said the pile of grain, I would have said, okay, Gadish chayav rechmana. The Torah holds you liable by the pile of grain. Because it's a big loss. Which this does sound like it's his thorns. Which obviously, I guess it sounds like people are just not careful with thorns about people and the property. But Akapon, the Gemara is saying it's a small loss. Amalai would say, okay, you're not going to be chayiv. I guess, yeah. I mean, it is really the guy's thorns, but you're saying people are just not careful regarding thorns. They don't care about it. Something that's is meant to be burnt. No one really needs the thorns for anything. So, Shai so that's what I'm saying. There's the flip side of that, saying, okay, it's a small loss. You would say you're not going to be chayiv. So no, you have to say thorns too. So Kamalamali, what do you have to say the case of the unharvested grain, the standing grain? To teach us the following comparison. Ma Kama Bagali, just like the standing grain is obviously revealed, it's the whole the field that's standing up the grain. Av Kal Bagali, so to anything that's revealed. It says the Gemara that Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, which is a machlekes in this paragraph on the next daf, the mechayiv and this kitama be'esh, he says you're actually liable for the damages of something hidden if it damages through the mazik of age. Kama lamali. Why would you need kama? Obviously, he's not including that which is revealed, because he holds actually yechayiv even if it's not revealed. So rather, it's l'rabbis kabali kaima, not kama, but the word kama is actually including anything of height. So Rashi says that means living creatures and trees, but Taisa brings from the Yerushalmi that it's including trees and all things that are connected. As the Yerushalmi says that you would think like a gadish is something that's detached from the ground. How do you know even things which are that are connected? As this is oy hakama, which is things that are attached to the ground. So it's different interpretations. What is the bali kaima that we're including that are not explicitly mentioned, but things of height? Rabbanan Rabbis Kabbalah Kamanal, where did they know this thing of all items of stature, such as trees and animals, that are also included in the liability? Nafkulim learns it out from the extra word me'oy hakama, not from, because they use hakama to tell you it has to be bagoli, like the kama. So how do you know bali kaima? From the word oy, extra word oy. Yehuda, no, oy me'boy le'lechalik. What do you mean? Oy, you need to separate, because you didn't have the word oy. You would think only chayiv if it consumes all those things the pasuk mentions. So says Rabban lechalik ben Allah, where did they know that you have that to separate and to say you're liable for each one individually? Because it says oy hakama oy hasada, so it has a different oy. Rabbi Yehuda, he says no. Oy hakama kasav oy hasada. So he doesn't have oy as extra because it's just because we had to have the oy of hakama. So then we said oy hasada. Okay. It says the Gemara sada lamali. What do we need the terminology of sada for? That's lasui lichacha nirei. That's to include if, let's say, it's scorched a plowed field that wasn't planted yet, or b'sichzacha avonav, which sichzacha is the same idea of scorching by stones, lechicha is by other things, that the actual field itself is getting burnt. Says the Gemara, sada is the biggest chiddush. That's like even for the field. So write field, and I wouldn't have to write the other ones too. So the Gemara, no tzrich is necessary. Why? Had the Torah only written field, I would have said masheb besada in. That what's in the field, yes, meaning the Torah is mentioning the grain, midachrini, but something else. Let's say the ground itself. Loy, I would have thought not. Kamash malan. Therefore, you already said the kama, the standing grain explicitly. So now, if you're mentioning sada, what do you mean by field? It must mean the actual field itself, the actual offer, actual ground, and that's why you have to say the other ones too. Now, the Gemara brings some agadic teachings related to the pasuk we mentioned. Amr Rabbi Shimon ben Nachmani, Amr Rabbi Yonasan. Says in Paran is Bala Olam. Punishment does not come to the world. Only when there's wicked people in the world. And where does it start? It starts, the righteous ones are the first ones to be afflicted. Shlomo says in the pasuk, when the fire goes out, the matzah kaitzim finds the thorns. What does this mean? When does the fire go out? Meaning when does it burn and consume? When there's thorns, which obviously is a terminology for the wicked, are found. But it only starts from the righteous. Like it says in the pasuk, v'nechal gadish. and the pile of grain, which obviously refers to the good stuff, gets consumed, which Gemara explains, it doesn't say now after the thorns, now it's going to consume the pile of grain. The past tense. The pile of grain was already consumed before the thorns. So it's happening because of the thorns, but again, maybe because, like we said, people are not careful with thorns, but it already consumed the pile of grain. Al Kapanim, we see that the tzaddikim, they actually are the first one to die, but only happens because of their sham of the thorns. A related discussion, Tanur of Yosef taught a brisa. Maidach said, what does it mean the pasuk in Shemais? Va'atam loiteitzu ish. This was by Makis B'chayres in Mitzrayim, that none of you men should go out mi pesach beise ad boker from the opening of his house until the morning. Why were they not allowed to go out by Makis B'chayres? Because once permission was given to the destructive force, that force did not differentiate between the righteous and the wicked. But not only that, the destructive force, like we mentioned before, actually starts from the righteous. Like it says the pasuk in Yechezkel. I'm going to cut off from you the righteous and the wicked. You see, first the tzaddik gets cut off, and then the wicked. So Bacher Visa was teaching this brisa. He was crying. It says, "Kule hai nami la'ayin daimen." Are we so much considered like nothing? In other words, are the righteous considered as so empty that they're the first ones to be punished? Abaye told him, he says, no, you make a mistake. This is a good thing for the righteous, that they shouldn't see the bad that's going to happen. We know many tzaddikim before the Holocaust that they passed away. It says the pasuk in Yeshaya, because of the bad, the righteous gathers in, meaning he passed away not to have to see and be party to that Holocaust. Now, related to that the pasuk we mentioned again, as we continue to Beis, says, a person should always enter when it's good, meaning when the sun is still shining, he should go and take his lodgings in his hotel. He shouldn't wait till it gets dark. And he should also go out when it's good. In other words, in the morning, he should not get up and leave until it's light. What's his ki toiv? So Rashi explains it's a good terminology that, as we find in the pasuk, referring to light. Hashem saw ha'or ki toiv, the light that it's good. In other words, it's good for a person to go out and to come in when it's still light because of the damaging forces and because of the bandits and the robbers. So therefore, it's better to go ahead and go in and go out when it's still light time. Which discusses is talking about going, coming into a city and out of a city. Al kapanim, like it says in the pasuk in Shemais, which is the pasuk we mentioned before. No one should leave until the morning. That alludes to this halacha that you wait till daybreak and then you leave on your trip. A related discussion, Tanam in the Brisa. Dever be'ir. If there's a plague in the city, kanas raglecha. Gather your legs in to your home. Shneimah says in that pasuk again. Which there was a plague. The Egyptians were dying. So it says, no man shall leave the opening of his house until the morning. You stay out, you stay indoors when the plague is happening. We all remember how plague works. And it says a pasuk in Yeshaya, Lechami, go my people, come into your rooms, and close the doors by you. Again, don't let anyone in. We saw this by COVID. Like it says the pasuk in Devarim, Mechutz teshakal cherev. From the outside, the sword is bereaving, meaning the sword of the angel of death. And from the rooms, there's awe, there's the fear of the death of the angel, which is not so out in the open. At least people feel somewhat safe. They're just a little dreading from the inside. It says the Gemara, why do you have to bring 3 psukim to say the same idea when there's a plague, you stay indoors? Says the Gemara, if we're going to say that would only be at nighttime, which we know there was curfews by COVID. During the daytime, somehow there's no concern. That's what it says, because at the night they have to stay indoors until morning break. Tashma, it says, so it says, go my people, come into your rooms and lock the doors. That would be even during the daytime. Okay, why do you need a third pasuk? Maybe you'd say that's only when there's no dread from the inside. But when there's dread on the inside, people had this by COVID also. I don't want to be locked indoors all day and go crazy. And even if there's dread on the inside, maybe at least if I'm on the outside, I'm going to have a company with other people, have some clandestine meetings and meeting with people. Maybe that's better. So Shema, you needed the third pasuk. On the outside, the sword is bereaving, and from the rooms is dread. Meaning, although that is dread from in the rooms that you're locked in, but still on the outside, the sword is bereaving. In other words, even then, it's better to stay indoors than to go outside when people are dying from the plague. Now, the Gemara brings that Rava Beidan Rischa, at a time of fury, meaning when there's a plague, we shouldn't have ever again such a thing, have a sachar kai. So he would actually close the windows. Why would he close the windows? So it says a pasuk in Yirmiyah, Ki Allah mavas b'chalinenu. We hear people say this by the Levi's, Aspedim, because death has come into the windows. So again, you have to know if there's deeper ideas over here. But he would close the windows that the plague should not enter and cause harm. In the Brayso, continue on this theme, Ru'av Be'ir. Let's say there's a famine in the city. So here you do the opposite. By a plague, you're konis raglecha. You gather your legs in, you go in, you lock the doors, and you lock the windows, and you stay there and you hunker down until it's over. By a famine is the other way around. Pazir raglecha. Scatter your legs, meaning leave. Shalom, it says the pasuk in Bereshis. Vayirav ba'aretz, it was a famine land. Vayirav Avram Mitzrayim alogusham, and Avram left. He went down to Egypt to live over there. And so to Va'ayim we have a pasuk in Malachim Beis. This is an incident that happened with 4 men that were Mitzrayim. So they were out of the camp because of that. So because of that, there was a well-known miracle that happened through them, as the Navi says over there. But they were telling amongst themselves, they said, look, if we're going to say when they come to the city, Rav Be'ir and the famines in the city, we're going to die over there. So you see that you have to go away when there's a famine. Says, why do you have to bring another pasuk here also? Because if you're going to say, when did we say this? That you should leave when there's a famine, when at least there won't be a danger to your life, to the place that you're exiling yourself to, where you're going off to. But okay, but if there's a possible danger to your life, then maybe don't leave even when there's a famine. That's why we have to bring another pasuk, which the end of that pasuk says, and it says that L'chu, let us go. V'nifla el machna Aram. Let's go to the camp of Aram. And what? Im yichayunu nichya. If we're going to live, we're going to live. And if we're going to die, the pasuk ends. We're going to die. Which that was the whole thing. They came then. They saw that actually they were all dead and whatever. That was the whole miracle that's well known. But you see that even though it's a danger to the life to go to the camp of Aram, they said we have no choice. You see, it's better to do that in a famine, which many people did that in the Holocaust. They would risk their lives for those potato peels or whatever this and that. You see, when there's a famine, you're pasuk lechi, even when it's a possible safek nefashis. Then the Brayso continue on this theme of Dever Be'ir. If there's a plague in the city, so al yahalach adam be'emtza derech. Don't walk in the middle of the road when COVID is striking and the roads are empty, everyone's staying indoors. Don't walk in the middle of the road. Because the angel of death is walking in the middle of the roads. Why? Since he's given permission, which we see he's killing people left and right. So Malcham walks straight through in the middle of the road. Shalom Be'ir, but if there's peace in the city, then don't walk on the sides of the roads. Why? They give him the less later shows. Since the angel death doesn't have permission right now, we don't see people just dropping dead. He hides himself, he walks on the sides. So if you're walking on the sides, you're going to bump into him also. So better than walk in the middle. If there's a plague in the city, a person should not walk in by himself into shul. Why? Because this was especially in Talmudic times, which their shuls would be out in the away from civilization, and it was a place where mazikin would be. Because the angel of death deposits over there his vessels, his tools. So you walk in by yourself, you might just not have a good meeting. Now, when they say if there's no small children that learn over there, and you have a meeting of 10 people, then if you walk in by yourself, it might be dangerous. But if they have these two things, that's not something to be concerned for. If dogs are crying, I don't know if I ever saw a dog crying. Do dogs cry? Dogs cry, I'm sure. They complain. Maybe that's what it is. That means the angel of death is coming to town. Klav mesachakim, if dogs are laughing or playing around, Eliyah Navi Bala'ir. That means Eliyah Navi is coming to town. It sounds like that time of the year is coming to town. Vahanamili, the less bahu in the keva, but that's only talking about if there's no female dog. Because then, I don't know if it's the crying and the laughing, only the laughing, whichever one it is, but then it's the female dog that's making him laugh. So it's no Eliyah Navi for you tonight. So definitely interesting to know these signs. Now, going back to halacha the Mishnah, which we were speaking about the mazik of Eish, so the Gemara actually continues with a story, a classic story. Yosef Rabami Ravasi. You had this Rabami and Ravasi, two colleagues. The Rebbe Rabbi Nafcha was in. He had his two talmidim. Well, maybe one of the snow days, and only two students showed up, and she goes, "Okay, Kindelach, what do you want to learn today?" It's not Kindelach. There's a big rabbanim. So Mar Amalei once said, "Lememar Shmaitza." Say over a sugya, ktseis achayishin, and the sivas and mishpat. Say over a sugya. Mar Amalei says, "Lemar God." Say over a drush. Say over a shtickle terach, some sefer, noim lemelech sugya, a gadita. It's a puzzle. He started saying a Gadic teaching, but the other one didn't let him. He says, "I'm not staying for this. I can't listen to a Gadic teaching." And that's the Ein Yaakov shir. They do that later. I want to hear a real sugya, a real halacha shir. So Pasuk Mem he started saying a sugya as a famous kasha, lom de shayl. The other one said, "I can't listen to such a thing. This is not for me. This is way over my head. I need to hear a Gadic." So Amalem, he said to them, it says, "Let me give you a mashal, let me give you a parable to say what this is compared to. A guy had two wives. One younger wife in her 20s, one in her older one in her 80s, who knows? The younger wife was pulling out his white hairs. She wants her husband to look nice and young. The older one is pulling out his black hairs because you have to look nice. You have to have this nice white beard. Comes that he's bald from this one and from that one. He's left without a beard because each one's pulling out the other one. And here you are. I'm trying to say this. So it's a classic challenge that a Rav has. He says, "Okay, no, he's too this. Oh, he's too that." And no one wants to come anymore to anything because it's. He said, "I'm not interested. He's not interested." So Amalei said, "Look, if that's the case, he says, look, I'll tell you over something." That's what he always has to do. The Rav, I'll tell you something that everyone will come. I'll give you a Gadik and Shmaitza in one thing, and both of you will feel okay, and you'll both say, "Wow, okay, we really appreciate the drasha, the shir from the Rav." And this is related to the mazik we're talking about. It says in the Torah, "Kiseitzi eish u'matzah kaitzim." This is really a classic prashas drachim. The Mishnah Melech had his classic sefer, which was halacha and drush and agadita together. It says that when the fire comes out, and matzah kaitzim, it finds thorns. Now, the reading of the word seitze, it goes out, sounds like me'atzma, meaning the owner of the fire, it sounds like didn't do it. The owner of the wood, it sounds like the fire on its own went away, which Rashi explains the metaphor is that Hashem obviously owns, he created us, but we ourselves caused it. We caused the destruction. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu guarantees he's going to pay as if he made the fire. Shalim yishalim hamaves ave'echa. The one who made the fire shall surely pay. Which from HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that although you're really the Jewish people, you caused the fire of destruction. But he's saying because it's Seitze Eish, you guys went off on your own. I'll make like I'm responsible. I take responsibility to pay for the fire that I made. Like as if ani hitzisi eish b'tzion, that I made the fire in Tzion. So it says the pasuk in Eicha, v'yatzis eish b'tzion, that he went and made the fire in Tzion, but toichis the and ate its foundations. But says Hashem, I'm going to pay back when the asl of nice b'eish. I'm going to ultimately build it with fire. Hashem like to the pasuk in Zechariah, v'ani eyel achemis eish shava. I'm going to be a wall of fire for it around. And for on, I'm going to be inside of it. So that was the Gadic part of the teaching. And then Shmaitza, he said of a halachic element. Pasach HaKasa Beniske, the pasuk opens up with damages that were damaged by Mamainai, by his money. Meaning it says Kiseti, which sounds like we said, on its own. Which he lit a fire in his own barbecue grill. And then it went and jumped into the friend's property. So it sounds like it's Niske Mamainai. But then beside Beniske Gufa. Then it concludes with damages like he's doing his own self, because it's calling Mavir, which sounds like as if he did it with his own hands. What's that teaching you? Loim tell you. Here he says the lomdisha part, the isha mishim chitzav, because his fire is because of his arrows. It's like you're shooting an arrow, which is damaging at a distance. Where he's doing it. Here also, he's doing it, which of course the nafkamina is, as we said in the second paragraph of Chav Gimel and Av, to be liable dal dvarim. You're only liable for tsar, reaper, sheves, bleishes, only if it's adama mazik, not if it's ish, not if it's mammon shemazik. So that's what this is teaching us. He says the same word was able to be said chasidish oifen, it was able to be said litvish oifen. He said both of them together. He says, I said the agadik, I said the shmeitza, and everyone enjoyed the shiur because he got both of them too. Now, here the Gemara quotes a related discussion, a little bit more of a complex, how to translate what's happening over here. But relating back to this mazik of Eish, the Gemara brings a pasuk in Shmuel Beis. It says, "V'yisava David v'yomer." That David had a desire, and he said, "Mi shekeni mayim mi bar beis lechem asher b'shar." Who's going to give me water to drink from the pit in Bet Lechem that's by the gate? And v'yibaku shleishes hagibor b'machne plishtim, and there were three mighty ones that broke through in the Philistine camp. And they drew water from the pit in Bet Lechem that was by the gate, etc. Which Asher Bashar refers to the Sanhedrin because they're the Zikne Hashar. They're the elders of the gate. So essentially, it's really a metaphor that David Melech had a shaila that he needed to ask in the course of his war with the Pelishtim related to the mazik of Eish that he needed to know from the Sanhedrin, and these ones braved it, and they sacrificed their life to go ask the Sanhedrin, what's the halacha? So it says, what was he asking? So Merav says, Amarav and Achman, that it was actually what we mentioned, Taman Be'esh Kumeh. He wanted to know when something is hidden inside something and the fire burns it, what's the halacha? Ikud Yehuda, Ikud Abanan. In other words, like Rashi explains, there was a story that happened in the camp in war that his men burnt a Jewish person's pile of grain. Now he had to ask the halacha, are they going to be liable to pay for the vessels that were hidden inside, like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds your chayiv on Taman Be'esh, or would you be part like Rabbanan? And says the Gemara, we don't know what they answered. Like we know always how they had Machlekes Rabbein Tam and Rashi. What was tefillin? What they always used to do. We know there was there, but what happened? We don't know the answer. But that was the shayla. That was interpretation number one. Another interpretation is Rav Huna says Gedishim Soidim di Yisrael Hava. It was piles of grain of barley that was owned by a Jew, which Rashi says he's relying on the pasuk, which says that so we know that it had to do with barley. The Philistines, were hiding inside the pile of grain of barley of the Jews. The question that was being asked, which obviously relates now as we have the war that's going on right now, could you save yourself with someone else's money? I mean, they knew that they were hiding these Yimach Shemamniks inside Jewish property, under Jewish grain. So could you burn them? Can you kill them? But then you're going to be ruined the Jews' barley. So Shochale, they said to him, actually, you're not allowed to save yourself with someone else's money. But you're the king. Pirates, and the king could break through the fence of other people's fields. Even if he wants to make a path, what's called eminent domain, and for him and his soldiers, as the Gemara says about Basad of Kofam and Beis, that the path of the king has no shiur, and no one could protest. So that was a second interpretation. Third interpretation, Rabbanon, some say it was Rabbi Bamaru, they said, Gedishim disarm the Yisrael Hava. What happened was there was pile of grain of barley that was owned by a Jew, and Gedishim da Dashim de Plishim. Now there were also piles of grain of lentils of the Philistines. The question he was asking was like this: is he allowed to take the pile of grain of the barley of the Jew to give his animals that needed to eat? I'll pay back the pile of grain I'm going to get when we conquered the Philistines of their lentils. So Shochalei, they sent him the pasuk in Yecheskel. Chaval, a pledge, Yashav Rasha, the wicked returns. Yizeli Yishalom, he pays back the robbery. Meaning, although he's paying back what he stole, Rashu, the pasuk is still calling him wicked. So you cannot take with the intention of returning it, would be still considered wickedness. Again, but he told him, you're a king, and the king could break through to make a path, and they don't protest, and therefore you'd be allowed to do it. So, says the Gemara, now that we have these three interpretations, the Gemara wants to understand. We understand according to the interpretation that said that it was to switch the Jews' barley with the non-Jews' lentils. That's why one pasuk says in Shmuel Beis, when it talks about the narrative, it says that the part of the field was filled with lentils. There's a different pasuk in Divrei Yom Aleph. We have a lot of time narratives that were said over in Divrei Yomim differently. It says because actually it was both. It was barley and lentils, and he wanted to switch the Jews' lentils for the barley for the Philistines' lentils. But according to the one that the question was regarding burning, which were the other two pshatim, either regarding Tom and Be'esh or regarding burning the Philistines inside to kill them. So my why do we need two psukim, one regarding barley, one regarding lentils? So Malachi would tell you that there was also, those pshat would hold that there was also piles of lentils of Jews. That the Philistines was hiding, it wasn't only barley. It was in barley and in lentils. It says the Gemara Bishlam, we understand according to one that says that it was to burn. That's what the pasuk says in Shmuel Beis, that he stood there in the portion of the field and he saved it, meaning he didn't let his soldiers burn it because although a king's allowed to, he said, but it's forbidden to save yourself with someone else's money. So now we understand what the pasuk is saying by Yitzileha. But according to one that says that it was to swap it, so what does it mean to save it? There was no saving, there was no fire involved. So the Gemara, no, that he didn't let them switch it to give them the barley to then pay back the lentils. Says Gemara Bishlam, you understand according to these two pshat, that's the two psukim of barley and of lentils, either to switch or because there was the Philistines were hiding in piles of lentils and the barley. But according to the one that says that the question was tam be'esh kamei where it was already burnt. So so what do you need the pasuk of saying that he's going to save? What's it to save? It's already burnt. So Amalach would tell you that actually it's about what was hidden. That was one question, and there was also one of these other questions, either regarding the Philistines hiding or regarding switching. So it says the Gemara Bishlam, you understand according to one that says these two, which was Heinrich said, we understand what it says in Shmuel Beis. Well, David didn't want to drink it. Amray says, keeping the kisur, since it's the prohibition, you're not allowed to save yourself with someone else's money, or you're not allowed to steal to pay back. I'm not okay with this. According to one that says that the first question, the first shot, which said it was regarding something was hidden in the pile of grain. So let's see, all they did was they sent him a halach shayla that he asked. What does it mean David didn't want to drink it? Says the Gemara means he didn't say it over in their name of those three people that went to risk their lives. Why? So this is a very enigmatic Gemara, well known. Amr says, my tradition from the Bezdin of Shmuel, from Ramod, was whoever gives over his life for the words of Torah, we don't say over the Halacha in his name. Because you could say that's another, that's humility, whatever, the bittul, whatever. We don't say it over in your name. So the Gemara just ends off. It says over there, he poured it out. He didn't want to drink the water. He poured it out for Hashem. So Bishlam Laman Dama to understand according to the last two pshat Mishum the Avil L'Shem Shemaim. He did it for the sake of heaven, since it's an issur regarding a regular person. He didn't want the benefits from such a thing. According to one that says that it was regarding that something was hidden in the fire. What does it mean he poured out for Hashem? It means the Gemara, meaning that we say it over the name the Gemara says, but we don't say who it says, again, because since they were Moisa Nefesh, you don't say it over in their name. And again, so it's a metaphor that he didn't want to say it over in the name. That means he didn't drink it, he poured it out for Hashem. Thank you for anything. Those things.